that's the next discussion we've not even had is where does AV line up in the competition for getting energy for having things that are fueled by AI? You know, the entire AV industry can fit in Amazon's year.
Oh yeah.
Twice.
Oh yeah.
This industry is going to be something entirely different a decade from now. And I think even the idea of Pro AV as its own sort of separate club and tribe, I don't think it's really going to exist in that way.
I will have to say this morning, I was the leader of the universe as I know it. This afternoon, I'm only a voice in a chorus. But I think it was a good day.
NETGEAR ups the monitoring and maintenance game for networks. Exertis might be for sale. And power management in AV. All that and more. Next on AVWeek. This is AVWeek, episode 692, recorded Friday, November 22nd, 2024. Monitoring AV. This is AVWeek, the weekly wrap-up of the biggest news and information we have gathered for the AV world. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. First and foremost, the guests that we have to give us their perspective. A young lady I got to hang out with this week. Her name is Brittany DeCesare from Control Concepts. Welcome, ma'am.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll talk about where she was and why I got to hang out with her at the end. Bren Walker from Kierkegaard. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello, Tim. Great to see everybody and to have this chat on a lovely Friday.
Absolutely. And last but not least, a young man that I've known for a while, but never had him on. So Chi Hanglo. Chi is from UCLA. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, team. Thank you, everyone. I'm new here, so nice to meet with everyone here.
We'll take it easy on you. Don't worry.
She's easy to talk to. So yeah, absolutely. So let's start with our first story here. And this is one's coming from AV Magazine. Exertis is for sale. Maybe. We'll see. Exertis, if you don't know and you're not familiar, if you haven't followed the family tree of mergers and acquisitions, Exertis is a distributor here in the States. They purchased Stampede and darn near instantaneously turned around and purchased Almo. So Exertis, Almo is what they're known here in the States, but globally they're known as Exertis. They're shifting from their global distributor part. The company that owns them is called DCC, and they are looking to focus or refocus on their energy division, DCC's energy division. Now, this divestment, which may or may not occur here in the next year to possibly up to 2 years, it's kind of following an operational improvement program that DCC put into place. DCC, again, they're seeing more money to be made, in their opinion, in energy transition. Exertis, they actually just won an award at AV Magazine's for Distributor of the Year. They made $50 million operating profit, $50 million US, off of nearly $3 billion in revenue. So they are not the biggest distributor in the world, but they are certainly not the smallest. They've established themselves as a leading global AV products distributor. They are pretty heavily involved here in the States. They're the ones who put on the Exertis Almo E4 event, incredibly popular local regional event here in the States. So we're going to follow this and see exactly when and where and quite frankly who DCC sells Exertis / Almo off to. Brittany, we're going to start with you on this. When we're looking at mergers and acquisitions, and oh goodness, it has been a couple of months for them. Understand, before we start this conversation, we are speculating, right? We are speculating. The story really came from DCC's filings and some of their reporting saying, hey guys, we're looking to get rid of this thing. We're looking to divest ourselves. But what does further consolidation like this do to the industry overall?
I mean, that's quite a big question. From my perspective, our industry, for as many big players as we have in the industry, we're also still small in that we have a lot of small players, and clients are used to the choice of being able to work with the small or the big. And I think with this comes the question of, well, what is this going to look like now, and what does this mean for the future? There's a lot here. I think we've seen that there's a lot of opportunity in the industry coming off of the announcement of QSC's acquisition, and that number. And it's great to see outside of our industry people investing into this industry and seeing that there's money to be had there. I think with this, it depends on all of the factors at play and who ends up being that person that ends up pulling in Exertis. And I think that depending on how that plays out could really speak to even more of the success of this industry to outside buyers and outside money, and really speak to our industry as a whole being a really viable industry and a viable career, which was really something, a little caveat to, we got to spend time talking to high schoolers this week. That's where Tim and I were, and really help them understand that this is a viable industry to build a career on. So I think with this, there's a whole lot here that could play out, and it's a waiting game. But I think there are pros and cons. We get to see if it's someone that's investing into, that's from outside the industry, or if this means within the industry things are changing and developing, and that's the beauty of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Brent, same kind of question is what does further consolidation mean?
Well, I think it's interesting that they are focusing on energy and energy transition as being, because 50 million on, would you say 3 billion
50, yes.
is that's not a great, that's not great margins, right?
No, it's not.
And I think what we're seeing is that we are continually seeing a race to the bottom with hardware, and those margins are going to continually to get tighter and tighter for everybody. And frankly, the power center of how the heartbeat of AV in the future is not going to be in any of the devices hanging in a room. It's going to be in a cloud. And the cloud processing depends on what? Energy, right? Like, I mean, that's the next discussion we've not even had, is where does AV line up in the competition for getting energy, for having things that are fueled by AI? So I see this as an inevitable thing where there's going to continually be less and less hardware, less and less differentiation in hardware. So there will be few players that will be able to make a margin on hardware unless they are doing something that is unique and different. In my view, this is similar to one of the sessions a few weeks ago where you asked about Amazon, Tim, and the entire AV industry can fit in Amazon's year.
Oh yeah.
Twice.
Oh yeah.
This industry is going to be something entirely different a decade from now. And I think even the idea of Pro AV as its own sort of separate club and tribe, I don't think it's really going to exist in that way. People will be doing what AV does, but they're going to be doing it in a broader context of bits and bytes moving. How's that for some speculation that we don't know?
Well, here's the thing, and Brendan brought up a very important point that happy to go down this road, but I am not smart enough to have that conversation, and that is the energy conversation. We recorded another show about Microsoft Ignite. Microsoft Ignite happened this week. And one of the panelists brought up the fact that Microsoft is investing in power creation, in nuclear power and other, simply because, to Bren's point, AI is consuming so much power. Like you going on ChatGPT is fine, right? And I'm a big fan of AI. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. But the consumption of power that is creating or the consumption of power that needs to do that thing is massive, and it's more than any of us have really kind of have wrapped our brains around yet. And the fact that, the AV revenue can fit inside Amazon a couple different times, the AV power consumption can fit inside AI millions of times. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting discussion here shortly. Chi, same kind of question. What does further consolidation mean to customers and end users when you guys are trying to, quite frankly, put out RFPs and you're trying to get the best system, but also the best deal?
Yeah, that's a really timely conversation. So because we are also thinking about the RFP to get a lot of solution to have the evaluations, right? I also, there's no doubt that AV also have a lot of discussion with AI right now to kind of using the AI to extract the information and also to kind of think about how we can basically using AI, you have a lot of devices you need to consume energies, right? But also think about this, when we do the energy to feeding the devices, also we can get insight from the energy consumption as well. So such as what is the time when the people are going to use more energies, right? And then you can figure out the better distribution network and system. So one of my example I learned from my previous institute. So we collect all the data from all the UPS, connect to the network, and then feed it to the dashboard, right? So that's give us a lot of insight to ensure a strong operation. Go back to this potential requisitions, right? I believe that they see the insight is also to create a bigger infrastructure that could be leveraged in energy network. So, and then I also believe that the AV will be very different after 5 more years later. So that will be not just the boxes. It could be like a hybrid approach, right? So the boxes, we have boxes. And then one thing I also thinking that a lot of sensors, new type of sensor will be introduced to the room, right? So let's say will be the motion detection sensor so that they can more accurate to detect the gesture inside the room. And then also they will, also we have more different type of ultrasound sensors, right, to capture the frequency within the room, to capture the air quality in the room. So this also we create a bigger energy consumption. So and then that will be a very interesting way we can see that how energy will play to contribute to the future AV conversation. And then also, I think that this is a great discussion, the sustainability, right? So a lot of a country, cities trying to deploy like the solar panel and then also the wind turbine to kind of generate the renewable energies. However, this approach also have a lot of challenge too. Let's say the weather is one of the biggest challenge, and also the damage, right? Let's say when you have the storm, we're going to damage the entire solar farm. So we also need to discover any newer way to generate energy as well. So I see that it's also shaping the design, fundamental design philosophy, how we're looking at renewable energy. So it's an interesting situation for the company making a shift as well.
Tim, one thought about this consolidation relative to customers and end users. And I think, again, this is sort of a way that AI is going to play into what the customer ends up buying. We as designers and integrators, we are constantly working with what we are told a product does versus what a product actually does.
What? No. Manufacturers always have on their spec sheets exactly what it does, and it always does that.
And if we see more, yeah, and we see more consolidation among distributors. The information about the reality of products, I think, is something that is going to be a cold splash in the face for a lot of people, because the wisdom of everybody understanding what products really can and cannot do, and having that information be publicly available and shared among the interested parties will make it much harder for differentiation. And again, it's sort of like driving prices lower. It will continue to drive price lower and will push more power to the end user in terms of what they're actually buying. I think this consolidation, the good thing that could come from it for the end user point of view is there could be more transparency depending on who ends up buying this and what they do with that data. And if they see it as being an advantage to show people what's real versus what isn't. Eventually someone's going to do it. And what's real versus what isn't is going to also be attached to the value of that thing that you buy. So you're not going to be able to sell me a $9,000 camera if people already know that $9,000 camera actually works like a $1,200 camera.
Yep, 100%. All right. Next story comes to us from our friends over at NETGEAR. We've got a version of the article posted on our website, AVNation.tv. NETGEAR has launched Engage 2.0. It is a free piece of software. It's a free software platform for AV network management through unified control of both wired and wireless systems. According to NETGEAR, the platform addresses growing complexities in AV over IP deployments with features like auto discovery and zero configuration setup. The platform supports NETGEAR's M4250, M4300, M4350, and M4500 series switches, along with routers and Wi-Fi, their Wi-Fi 7 access points, making a quote-unquote advancement in AV network management technologies. Brandon, I'm going to start with you on this. When your Kierkegaard designs a lot of really cool systems, when you guys are talking with customers, what exactly do they want, need, and desire as far as monitoring and maintenance of systems, specifically in this case, network systems, but AV networks overall?
The primary thing that I hope this solves is different levels of permissions across the network.
Okay.
Right? So that I can decide, I can have different classes of users who have different levels of access in terms of what they can and cannot do with that network and the devices on it. It'll be interesting to me to see who ends up actually owning this, right? Like, this is free software for a reason. There will be other free solutions out there and agents that can do similar work as this. And for a typical, say, performing arts center user, they don't want to have to come back and deal with this. They need to be able to set it and forget it because there are far more mission critical things that are happening down the line in that system from the network architecture. And, same with, I won't speak for university since we have some representing university here, but when your staffing is that limited, you have to rely on tools in order to help you manage what it is that is all the devices that are in your network. So I think it'll be interesting to see how much uptake there is and how often they release updates, and how far you can go in terms of not just managing the devices, but the biggest pinch point, the biggest problem always is with the users on a system more than the components of the system itself in terms of vulnerability. And you would hope that what this will do is help you minimize your risk in terms of vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. Chi, same kind of question. You are the end user, UCLA. So what do you want? What are you looking for in terms of monitoring your network?
First thing, right? So before we monitoring, so I think the deployment process is quite important for me to have the unified solutions, right? So one thing I look at the document, they mentioned that the serial configuration setup. A lot of times, so the deployment is nothing wrong for the solution. It's the human errors to deploy this incorrectly, right? As Brent mentioned, that to have a profile, we can push and then can kind of eliminate a lot of configuration issues. And then also, I see that for the network management standpoint, I really want to collect more, have the open API to collect more informations. One of the very interesting use case I learned is using from the access point, right? So in each classroom, so each student, I guess, they definitely have more than one devices, right? So that how you capture all the devices, that will be very interesting to see the bandwidth consumption within the space. And also in the future, I more like the future plannings too. I believe that all the students, they will connect their laptop to the class. They can see the presentation. For me, I'm not a native English speaker, so I definitely really need some type of translation, transcription to help me to digest the material easily. Everything will very reliant on the legwork, bandwidth, and also the cloud computation. So to capture all the information to reflect back to the owner, stakeholder, to kind of have a future planning, and also to do the network fine tune, this is really, really valuable for me.
All right. Brittany, a little bit different take here. Bren mentioned one of the questions is who owns this? That was one of the questions I had when we did a debrief with our friends at NETGEAR. And what I mean by that, and Bren, I do not want to put words in your mouth, but I think this is what you were saying, is who's owning that software once it's deployed, right? Is it the client? Is it the customer, the building owner, the facilities owner? Is it the integrator, right? It's not NETGEAR. Right, they quite frankly don't have the bandwidth, and this is a free piece of software, so they don't have the budget either to own this. So when you're talking with manufacturers about deploying software and deploying the systems and the software that Control Concepts develops, who ultimately owns the actual software that they're giving out for free in this case?
It depends on who you're talking to. I'll say that.
Okay.
For us, we choose to have the manufacturers own that, and we think it's important that they own that solution. But with that, there's a mechanism of support that is done through us, and that's my big question with this: is when support is needed, where are they going? What's their line of contact? Because I guarantee you it's probably not NETGEAR answering the phone saying we can absolutely help you with this, especially with it being free. And for us, monitoring has been a big ask of our company related to the industry this entire year. And monitoring is not an easy feat, and monitoring takes a lot of time and hours to develop what seems to work seamlessly in the field. And the thought that this is just out there for free, I'm wondering, okay, well, what exactly are you monitoring then? Because it's not going to be very in depth, in my opinion. You're going to be limited in what you're able to get that data on. And then as we have these new devices entering in, like those APIs have to get connected somehow. And that's a whole lot of time to make all of that happen and happen on the back end. We know because we've done it. We've built monitoring platforms. We've built different databases for monitoring platforms. So all of it entails a whole lot of time and effort, and also support. And that was I think that's the big thing, is what do you do when you have a question, you have a need, who do you go to? That's something that's really going to need to be answered, because the reality is you've got to be able to bring it down to the least common denominator, and that's the person with the least amount of knowledge sitting here being a user, and when they need help, where they go.
Yeah, absolutely. Really quickly, Brittany, you said something there about the API being updated. When you're talking, like, silly question, because from when in my integration days and my poor coding days, it was the integrator who was updating the API, updating firmware, right? And I'm going to make a bad correlation here. So in the world of APIs, when you have the firmware is updating here, and the software, because that's what's updating the API, is over here. I guess is this the same question as who's doing that?
Well, not necessarily. So firmware is typically done manufacturer side, software not necessarily. And so just because there's been a firmware push with perhaps new features and new functionality doesn't mean it's supported on the software side. And so that's the other thing, that you have to make sure all of that's connected. Just because it exists in the API doesn't mean it's accounted for in your drivers. So it takes that additional level of not only support but upkeep and keeping it updated. And all of these firmware pushes could break something on the software side. So you need to make sure you've got that checks and balances in place. So that's the other thing, like who is taking responsibility for that? It's still a big question.
I think ultimately it begs that the role of the person doing AV at an institution now has a very different role. Because I don't see the integrator actually being able to deal with this, because this is going to be just like this is a utility, right? And whoever owns this utility at their organization owns the entire function of their system. They will know better than anybody else whether or not they're going to actually push through a firmware update, because they know what the repercussions are going to be. And there's no way that NETGEAR, not even a company like Microsoft, could actually support people in all the various different kinds of configurations that you could end up with to know all of the known possibilities. So the person at the company, at the institution, is going to have that skill set. And that skill set is going to matter way more than some of the things that we value today.
But Brent, isn't that why Microsoft has their certification program, right? And I've said this on a podcast before, where my understanding, because I've never made a product, I've never submitted to Zoom or Microsoft, the Microsoft certification product today is more robust than the Zoom one. Okay, that has been said to me on several times. But they do that because if you have a problem with a Microsoft certified product, the expectation is you can call Microsoft. Or am I silly in thinking that?
A little bit.
Okay.
I think that you'll be able to reach out to Microsoft about the sort of, the big issues that everybody's going to encounter because of something event driven around the software, right? Or around the hardware. So this firmware update has created all of these things. And so now, the same way if you go to Microsoft's knowledge base on various issues regarding their operating system, you will not necessarily find your issue. You're going to find things related to your issue, and then you've got to use some deduction to figure out, okay, how does this apply? It doesn't happen until there's enough of a mass of people experiencing it for them to address it. So ultimately, it's still going to come down to that network manager who knows that system better than anybody else and has taken ownership of it from the integrator, because the integrator is not there day to day. And there's only so much you can do through service contract, I think.
So I'm going to give anybody listening a pro tip. This has nothing to do with AV, 100% to do with Microsoft or any other software. Find yourself a discussion board. Find yourself a discussion board and search whatever problem you're having, because 90% of the time somebody else has had a similar issue, maybe not exact, right? And somebody has at least posited a workaround, because Brent's right. Knowledge bases, generically speaking, aren't the greatest in the world, and they're written by engineers that think differently than the rest of us.
And they're for their own products that they know well. So how can they do it better for certified products that they didn't manufacture, but that they just took through a series of requirements to say it's certified? It's certified to eliminate a bulk of issues, but it's not going to eliminate all issues. And ultimately, the person on site is going to need that level of knowledge and should be, if this is what you're doing now, you should be upping your game now on network. You should be upping your game now. I mean, the whole convergence is coming. Convergence been here. AV over IP has been here. This is not a trend anymore. We are now here. This is how our data moves around a building. This is how our data moves between site to site. So you now have to understand that and realize that it's the same as it was before. You still have a signal. That signal is just moving on a different pathway. And now the onus is on you to understand how that pathway works.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I always believe that the design also will empower the user, use the system confidently, right? So to provide all kind of necessary training and also make sure that they can have full control, have full documentation. This is really, really important. But go back to this question, I think that definitely will be the service team. They need to take ownership for this run, right? Because they were going to manage the backbone for the entire organization. So if they cannot do it, who's going to do that, right? So this is, but I think that this solution would be great, yeah, to empower the people.
So what I heard Chi say is that he volunteers to own this for UCLA. Joe Way, I have it on recording that she is volunteering. So, all right. Thank you, guys. That'll do it. Bren Walker, always great to see you, ma'am. How do people connect with you or Kierkegaard?
Bren at Kierkegaard.com, LinkedIn, Brenda J. Walker, and I'm showing up every week now.
Ms. DeCesare, thank you, ma'am. First of all, tell folks why I got to see you in the beautiful state of New York this week.
So we were in attendance at Next Level's AV Talent Summit. This is their second year in a row. It takes place at Pace University. And what this does is bring professionals in the industry and also students studying AV to speak to high schoolers and some middle schoolers about how AV is a viable career and what a path in AV could look like for them. So it's been a really great event. Last year, I think it was over 120 students. This year was over 160, I believe. So wonderful way to share and get people interested in a career here, not just finding their way into a career here. But also it gives a great opportunity for high schoolers and even college students to inquire with the AV professionals in the room about their questions and their concerns and what they're looking for from the industry so that we can do our part as professionals already here to provide that for them and make a way for them to enter. So it was a really super exciting event. Thank you for asking about that, Tim.
Yeah, George Chaco and the team there does a great job. Next Level does a great job. Brittany did a fantastic job moderating a panel of college students talking about their path, and it was really interesting and eye-opening. So, Brittany, how do people connect with you or Control Concepts?
Yeah, so you can go to controlconcepts.net, and you can reach me on LinkedIn at Britt Dice.
All right. Gee, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. How do people connect with you or UCLA?
It's very easy. So when they go to LinkedIn, you search my name, Chi Hang No, without space, you're able to find me. My email at UCLA is very easy to reach out to me too. chihangno at it.ucla.edu. You're able to reach out to me as well.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. For Tim Albright, don't follow me anywhere. It's not very interesting. I will complain about the Chicago Bears. Not to the level that Bren will complain about the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, no. I'm well past that. You know, there's no complaining now. There's nothing but,
It's acceptance. It's acceptance.
Exactly. I'm well deep into the stages of grief, dude. Come on.
All right. Bren and I are both, that her team of the Browns, my team of the Bears, and neither one are particularly great.
Hey, my team is a Washington team, the Commanders. We're finally actually on the uptick. So I've lived.
I don't, do they play in the NFL? Do they?
Ever heard of them? No.
Never heard of them.
Only this year, probably.
Neither have I ever heard of your quarterback who was picked second after the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, never heard of him either.
Actually, you know what? If you want to follow my writings that's not AV related, you can follow me on LinkedIn. How about that? I will promote that at least because I'm starting something new this year, trying to get myself out of just talking about AV all the time. So you can check me out on LinkedIn. Go by the website, though, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. Brand spanking new podcast. It was an AVNation special, taking a look at the Extron DTP3 Crosspoint. That was really great. Also a brand new AV career mastermind with Jen Weaver. She talked with West Point about the AV industry and migrating folks from being a soldier, being in the military, to getting into the AV industry. So that's really cool. For those of you watching on YouTube and you're tired of looking at me, you can go to the podcast and just listen to me. And if you're listening to the podcast and you wonder what these fine folks look like, you can go over to YouTube and watch them there. So either way, go the opposite direction, depending on your consumption of choice, I suppose. But before you do any of that, go by the website, avnation.tv. That is avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AV Nation.